Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel. Well, everybody, it's Thursday once again, and it's time for another Thirsty for Theory Thursday. And today we're going to talk about a very Avery Mayday. And today we have a very large panel of people who want to talk to us about this. We have K9 Kim, we have Maz, we have Christy, BB, Sammy, all the way from the UK, Kate, and from Linda K listening, Linda K. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. So Christy, as everybody knows, Christy is the one who's taking the time to listen to all the calls and just produce the excellent call summaries. And she's going to lead us through a discussion of the primary reason for this call. So Christy, why do we want to call this a very Avery Mayday?
Well, this podcast is going to be focused on the phone calls that took place in May of 2006. And the family is just in crisis. And we felt that Mayday was a good, Mayday, a call for help. This family's in crisis. They need help. It's all fallen apart. There's a big handful of calls to listen to in May that start this whole thing. But it really starts back in April after Chuck goes to Calumet to pick up Dolores's golf cart in Stevens Grand Dam. I believe that happens on April 3rd. In call 773, we hear that Chuck has just gotten back with the golf cart, the Grand Dam, and Jody's purse. Jody's excited. She's got her purse back. I'm not 100% sure which call it's in at the moment, but we will have a link to it. A couple days later, law enforcement tells Steven that they released his Grand Dam to Chuck and Jody. So Steven learns that Jody was with Chuck. And if anybody's been paying attention, we all know how Steven feels about Jody and Chuck being in the same vicinity together. Steven really loses his mind and really starts fighting with everybody. We don't have a clear picture of what took place between April 9th and I believe it's May 14th, because we don't get any calls. We don't have any more calls until May 15th. So there's a lot going on between April 9th and May 14th that we don't hear. We have no idea. But when the calls pick back up in May, you can clearly tell there's tension.
Do we know, Christy, whether those calls were denied as a part of the FOIA, or whether or not the person who did the original FOIA just didn't happen to think that those were important to listen to?
I'm not 100% clear. I do not believe they were denied. I was told that the original FOIA request was based off of the same FOIA request that Michael Griesbach did for his book.
Okay.
So I can't say with certainty, so I don't want to say one way or the other. All I know is we don't have those calls. I have not heard of an actual denial for them yet. We should know soon. I really don't have much more information on that at this point. So back to, if you go to the spreadsheet, there's a link in the description of this video for that. It will list all the calls that we're going to be talking about. They are all from May. They start at 810. So it's 810, 812, 813, 814, 824, and then 828 all the way through the end of 839. I think it's very important because all those calls lead up to the explosion that happens. The last call we hear at that point, Steven's not talking to anybody. He's told Dolores he's done with her. He's not talking to her anymore. He's told Chuck he's not talking to him anymore. He'll never call him again. And he's suing Avery Salvage Yard for stealing his car. And Alan has thrown out Jody. And so we put together a group last week and we listened to all these calls together. And we have this great panel put together that wants to discuss these calls. So now that I've given you I've set the stage, I'm going to let everybody else talk about their thoughts and feelings and what they perceive happened. And I recommend everybody listen to these calls. It gives you a clear picture of how law enforcement just really ripped apart this family and got everybody to be at each other's throats.
Yeah, I really think that the Foul Play Discord server event where everybody got together to listen to the calls was really, really successful. And we're going to try and do that again with more calls. We know we have the Brendan calls coming soon and the post-May calls. And I'm really looking forward to that, and really trying to get Millbilly to do one of these with some of the dispatch calls as well. So that'd be great if we can pull that off.
He's working on me. He's trying to get me to listen and try to do some things with the dispatch calls too and line some things up. So it's something we're working on. It might be somewhere in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So who wants to go first and share their feelings about the call? What struck you? What was the first call? 710, you said?
810.
810. Who wants to go first and talk about what struck them from call 810? BB.
I don't know if it was specifically 810, but one of the first one or two calls, we get a list of additional smokers because they're talking about Jody smoking in Mama Avery's house and what's she doing smoking at 2 a.m, and she shouldn't be, and it scares me and I don't like that, and she was told not to. But they also list that Chuck Avery, Earl Avery, and Candy Avery are all also smokers.
That is mentioned. Yep.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because that goes back to the sink and the blood in the sink, and that he smelled smoke in the house, and there's a list of additional smokers.
I'm going to help refresh people's memories, just because it was about a week ago that we listened to all these calls together. When we started 810, Steve, you can tell that Dolores and Jody are not getting along. Dolores is bitching about Jody. Jody's bitching about Dolores. The tension is building. You can definitely hear more sarcasm in Dolores's voice. The tension's just really starting to build. In that first phone call, they do talk about how Stephen has, let's see, over 100 hours and $7,000 invested into the phone so far. Dolores also tells Stephen that Alan sits up north and cries about everything going on, and I thought that was very heartbreaking. It's just the real start of the fight. So I think people were really shocked, and a lot of, while we were listening to the calls, everybody was making comments of how bad they felt for Dolores. You could just hear it. You could hear her fed up.
I know that I've had people stay at my house for extended periods, and other people do that. And it just never seems to go well, no matter what they do, it always seems like there's some type of freeloading going on. Does Dolores think that Jody's a freeloader? Sammy?
Absolutely. She's not doing any of the chores around there. She's not contributing in any way, and they're just sick of it. I mean, Dolores is even running her around to do whatever it is she needs done,
Linda?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that Dolores she can't hardly walk, she's older, and Jody is there. And when you do stay at somebody's house, you tend to help. But I think a lot of it is the tension between Mama Avery and Jody is that Stephen wants them both to just jump, and he wants everything, his way. And Dolores is like, look, I can't do all this running around, this is hard for me, and she should do this, and she should get a job. And Jody is just like resenting, I think, that Dolores is telling her to do these things when she's, confused. I think Jody's like really confused about how things are playing out. They're not playing out so nicey, like she thought they would be.
Yeah. So why is it, do you think, that Jody doesn't want to get a job?
Then Jody would have to do something. Jody thinks she's a princess. Jody's a spoiled brat. I want to go back to Dolores for 1 second. I think another part of the problem here with Dolores and Jody is Dolores has a completely different view on how the little woman is supposed to act. You're supposed to cook, you're supposed to clean, you're supposed to take care of your man. Dolores was born in the 30s, right? Early 30s, 20 something. Dolores is old school. Dolores' version of how things are supposed to be is completely
Don't-
different than how Jody's
Don't
living.
mock that, Christy. There's nothing wrong with it.
Hey, I'm not saying that at all. I'm talking about the values here. The values here. Dolores thinks that Jody should, if this is who Stephen wants to marry, then Dolores wants somebody who's going to take care of Stephen the way that she took care of Alan. You know what I mean? And Jody's not
Yeah.
conforming to that. So above and beyond the laziness and everything else, I just think Dolores doesn't like that. Jody's just not a good pick for Stephen, and that's not who Dolores would prefer. I think Dolores would prefer him with Debbie, honestly. She talks about how Debbie doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, and blah, blah. But so I think that has a lot to do with Dolores's disdain for Jody, as well as just she's not an old school woman. Jody's, we know when Stephen talks to Chuck in one of these phone calls that Jody's been lying about getting cigarettes from Chuck and getting food from Chuck and talking to Chuck and so I think Dolores is also kind of fed up with the fact that she's hiding things from Stephen, because Dolores obviously knows that Jody's talking to Chuck and she's not telling Stephen. And when Stephen finds out that Jody went with him to get the Grand Am, he's all pissed off at Dolores because Dolores is not supposed to be allowing Jody to be anywhere near Chuck. It's just it's a cluster. It's just a mess.
So, Maz, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, similar to what Christy was saying, basically. Like I say, I'm not sticking up for Jodie in any way, but I feel that, she's uncomfortable in Dolores's house anyway. But, Stephen's telling her that she's got to help Mara out, she's got to do the job, she's got to do this. But also on top of that, she's got to write letters, she's got to go in all these businesses, knock on all their doors to try and get money. He wants her to get a job, but it mustn't coincide with visiting hours, because he also wants her to be there for every visiting. So, he suggests getting a job with Barb. Well, Barb has already said that she works from 4:30 in the morning to like 4:15 in the evening. And there's no way on this earth that Jodie is capable of doing that amount of hours. It would kill her within the first week. So, yeah, we wants to help out. But, she's caught within the devil in the deep blue sea, as it were, because, she wants to please Dolores, please Stephen, and get him out because she just wants her man back home again.
Well, Debbie Clump actually asked her dentist for money, if I remember right.
Yeah, that was funny. Yeah.
Debbie went above and beyond to try to collect money for Stephen, and Jody just wanted to spend the money.
I just had dentists here in the UK and saying, my partner's in prison and I need a couple of £1,000 off you. Can you help? They just look like you've got a screw loose.
I think that would happen over here too, Maz.
Oh, right.
Sammy, you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, yeah. Well, you look at it this way, Dolores and Alan, they're older. They need someone to help them around the house with the grass. I think Dolores would appreciate if Jody did some dishes and some cooking. I mean, stuff like that. Even Alan mentions, she won't even cook. Nothing. Really feel like she's kind of disconnected from the whole idea of being under someone else's roof and them providing for you every way they can, and you're not contributing one iota. I think that's the biggest thorn in Dolores' side. I really think that has more to do with this whole her being lazy thing. As far as Dolores' opinion, I really believe that it's lost on some people when they're under someone else's roof. How much that person is providing for them, and for there to be some contribution in some way makes a difference in someone's day.
Doesn't it always happen? It just seems the cases that I'm familiar with, it always seems to happen that after you get done doing some good deed, like taking somebody in, that there always ends up being some level of resentment after that of the person who actually had the good deed done for them to the people that did the good deed. That doesn't isn't that an irony of life, Linda?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Dolores is like, well, she the way she talks to me, she's always running off, and she's spending the money that she's supposed to be, where's she getting money for cigarettes? And I think a lot of it is a respect factor for Dolores too. I mean, because Jody doesn't seem to be respectful of her and the way she talks to her.
Yeah, she could do a lot better. Now let me ask you guys this. I mean, did Jody have a choice of 50 places to go? She just chose to move in with the Averys, or how did she end up at Mom and Pa's?
Stephen put her there.
Yeah.
I don't believe she really had many options on where to go. The trailer wasn't lit. I mean, at one point she's spending time down in Raleigh's trailer with no running water and no toilet just to escape the drama going on in the house. And not that I want to stick up for Jody either. I have mixed feelings on Jody, especially after listening to all the phone calls. And I'm not saying anything bad about Stephen either. I mean, all things considered, you got to take a step back and look at the whole big picture. Jody was taking a lot of shit from every angle. I mean, she was out of jail for 5 minutes and Stephen's barking out orders at her to do this and do that. And those first few weeks in March, it was good. I mean, I feel like she was helping, she was doing everything she could. But Stephen and Jody even fight about this. She says it numerous times. No matter what I do, it's not good enough. Nothing I do is good enough. I feel like Jody was also in a spot where she didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to please people or what. I just think there was a lot more going on, and it was a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of the drama was started by Stephen. Stephen was the one causing a lot of this. Jody would confide in him about something that happened, and the next thing you know, and she would ask him, don't say anything. And then he would confront Dolores. And even though Jody asked him not to, it would just cause problems. You know what I mean?
It seems to me he's very much a control freak. He likes things done his way. And even if they're going a certain way, he wants it done another way just so he could say he had control over it.
I believe he thinks he's smarter than everybody else and he knows the right answer. I'm not even sure it's a control thing as much as he just thinks he knows better than everybody else.
BB,
you know what I mean?
You got something for us? Yeah, I do. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of resentment on all sides. Jody would say, well, like, she kind of, I guess, felt not wanted and said, well, I'll just go to my room then for a while. And Mama Avery would tell her, it's not your room.
Exactly. I mean, Dolores was definitely being petty, and I don't want to say anything bad about Dolores because I love Dolores, but some of these, it gives the appearance that Dolores was being pretty petty. I mean, Stephen wanted
not letting her read the lawyer papers. Yeah, because her name isn't on them.
Right. Yeah. There's a point where Stephen wants Dolores to give Jody the letters that have come from Strang and Buting, all the paperwork. Because Jody wants to read them, and Stephen says, get them from Dolores. And when Jody asks for them, Dolores pretty much tells her, no, you can't read them. They're not yours. They're not addressed to you. Even though Stephen has told her to let Jody read them, Dolores is refusing to let Jody read them for whatever
and then you get
reason.
into that, which came first, the chicken or the egg,
Exactly.
Who was rude first, and then it snowballs into this big thing where
when somebody gets on your nerves, they start to get on your nerves for everything, right?
Right. Yes. No good deed goes unpunished, I think was a saying you were looking for earlier when you help somebody. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Maz, you got something for us?
Yeah, Jody is also getting excuse me. Jody is also getting money from some guy called Bob, who at the moment we're not too sure who this Bob is. But she tells Stephen, I've got to meet Bob because he's going to give me $100. But don't tell your family because he doesn't want them to know that he's giving me money. So what does Stephen do? In the next phone call to Ma, Jody's got to meet Bob because Bob's going to give her some money. And then he tells Chuck, then he tells Earl, Bob doesn't want to come on the premises because apparently Bob's got a Firebird and it's easily recognisable. But, the whole family know about this Bob. And yet Jody has specifically said, he doesn't want anybody to know that he's giving me money. I'm keeping it to one side. And, he just can't keep his mouth quiet, bless him.
I wonder if he was trying to shame Chuck because Chuck only gives out 50 at a time.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Kim, you have a comment for us.
Well, isn't that about the time that maybe Dolores falls or her knees are bothering her? She's in pain. She needs a little bit of help around the house, picking up, vacuuming.
Not yet.
Why she
Not yet.
Actually, that was right at the end,
Yeah, not yet.
after the
Oh,
explosion.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But her knees are hurting her. She has, she keeps complaining. I'm 70 years old. My knees are worn out. I'm doing everything I can, Steve. You got me going all these places. I had to go pay all these bills.
Kate.
Hi, yeah, I was just going to say, I believe in the phone calls even before all of this, when Jodie was still in prison, Ma Avery didn't trust her then. So I think there was a lot of distrust for her even before she moved in. So that may add to why Ma didn't want her to look at the documents and didn't want her to have any of Stephen's things.
Oh, absolutely. She was definitely suspicious of Jodie. It definitely, but at the the point,
Steve
she
was
could have just
adding
let,
to that. Yeah.
everybody was contributing to this fallout that happens. Everybody. That's why I said it's just a great big miscommunication. And if everybody just could have talked instead of bickering and arguing, and if the topic could have been something other than Chucky, 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 then maybe these people could have gotten somewhere. But Stephen wanted to focus on Chucky, 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 and Jodie wanted to focus on Debbie, Debbie, Debbie. Nobody wanted to talk about what was really going on. It was just a bunch of bickering and arguing and yelling at the grand total of $7,000. And that was the other problem Dolores was having, that all this money was getting spent so that Stephen could talk to Jodie, and all that was going on was yelling and screaming. I mean, 45 minutes of bickering. 45 minutes at $4.70 to connect and 49 cents a minute is an expensive freaking argument every day, 5 times a day.
Oh, most definitely. And isn't it true that pretty much Jodie, Stephen was giving her stuff to Jodie for Jodie to sell to put the money on the phone, and the family is pretty much concerned that Stephen's assets and all the stuff he owns are dwindling down to nothing, and they don't think Jodie's kind of worth it.
Well, there's
Right,
another
right.
little wrinkle there too, because Chuck has told everyone that Jodie has said that as soon as Steve gets out of jail, she's breaking up with him and dumping him. That she's only here right now for basically what she can get until he gets out of jail, and then she's off. She's done. So
Yeah,
kind of Chuck, Mom, and Pop all form this little union together to like make sure Jodie doesn't get the assets, to lock them up in the impound, and to, keep her, delay her, everything. Steve says, sign that title over to her now. And Mama Avery's like, well, it's locked up. The morning's fine enough,
Seemed like Barb was in on that in one of the calls too, that she at least understood that strategy and was not against it.
Well, we also understand Alan is saying, you know what, you're not married to her. That's not your wife.
Right. Maz, did you have a comment? I saw your light was off.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say now.
That happens all the time. One of the what I thought was a sadly comedic moment in one of the calls I listened to was Stephen berating Chuck for not having his tape recorder and not having his tape recorder on.
At the moment Jodie had said about leaving him, yes.
Yeah. So it's like
that was hilarious.
I just it's the way that Chuck react is like, well, I can't have it with me all the time. So it wasn't like, well, what do you mean you don't go around tape recording people? That's not what civilized people do. That's not what we do here. It's, I just didn't have it on me. I can't have it with me every second. It's like, but that's the way he's expected to behave, and he's actually a little bit, yeah, well, I just didn't have it with me this time. Is that how many of the Averys carry their tape recorders around all the time just to tape what's going on? It's just a little bit over the top. BB.
When Barb references that to him once, he tells her she should have had a recording and got a recording of it also. And yeah. Evidently the Averys are expected to be wired up at all times.
Maz.
Yeah, Stephen's argument back was, well, you carry your cigarettes in your pocket at all times, don't you? So,
oh yeah, that's right, he did. Chuck was like, yeah, so
carry a pocket player with you, like we all do.
You know, I just want to say those who know me know that I'm not left speechless very often in life. And there was numerous times that these calls left me slightly speechless. Like, are you really serious? And the whole why aren't you tape recording every minute of your life kind of was one of those moments where I was just like, wow, I have no words. I have nothing to say because wow. But yes, he berated Chuck for not having his tape recorder in his pocket next to his cigarettes.
Okay, so I guess that's sort of the beginning. So what actually is the event that prompts the fall? We know that Stephen gets upset because of the finding out that Chuck was there with Jody. Of course, we know Jody can't drive, so it wasn't clear how the granddam was going to get back, or she doesn't have any driver's license because of her drunk driving. They took it away. But that's not the end, isn't it? So there is an event that really causes the shitstorm to start. What is it, Maz?
Yeah, I think Alan finds out that his beer's been going missing from the fridge, and that he thinks that Jodie's taking it down to the trailer and secretly drinking it, which obviously she shouldn't be doing at all. So I think that's one of the things that contributes to this big build-up at the end as well.
Yeah, and isn't it the case that by the end of May, isn't Jody back in jail?
Yes.
Picked up because her probation officer, because somebody quote unquote outed her. And isn't it quite possible that the outing of her happened on these phone calls rather than somebody calling up her probation officer directly?
I believe
by
so.
all means.
Oh yeah.
And I believe that they either got it from the phone calls or somebody in that family called, because in call 839, when Stephen's talking to the pastor in Oshkosh, is that where? I think so.
Yes.
She makes the statement that your brothers told Jody you're the one who called. Stephen would never, ever rat out Jody. There's no way.
Well, can Stephen actually make an outgoing call that's not collect?
No.
No, I mean, I don't think he could do it if he wanted to. He's not gonna. If he tries to call a police station collect, I don't think they'd accept the charges, right?
But
I think he could just flag down an officer, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They would have brought
that
probably that same secret phone they bring him to call his lawyer that's not recorded. He did say there was a cordless phone, that there is a phone, so he could have very well gotten a Calumet jail officer and said, I need to call or he absolutely could have done it. Would it have been an actual phone call? I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know that it's actually quoted that Stephen called. It's Stephen's problem. Stephen did it, though, is what the family is telling Jody, that Stephen's responsible for this. And unfortunately, like great TV shows, that's the cliffhanger we're left with. We don't know what happened. I mean, we obviously know what happens, but we don't know specifically how this turns out. The last phone call we have is Jody's been picked up, and the family is telling her that Stephen did this. Stephen's the one who...
Actually, it was the Reverend, wasn't it, that said that the cops had told Jody that it was Steve that ratted her out.
No, I could have swore she said your brother told her
that your
it.
brother. She told Steve. Jody said your brother, but I'm pretty sure that she said the police had let Jody know that the brother had that you had ratted her out.
So who can give us some context on this pastor? Who is this pastor?
Wow, well, she's hilarious. That's one thing for sure.
She's just she was led by God. The Lord led her there. She contacted Dolores. I can't remember if it was a phone call or a letter, but she contacted Dolores, and then they came out to meet with Dolores, her and another woman.
This is just out of the blue. She calls up.
The Lord led them there.
Does she have any history? Does she have any history with Jody or anything like that? Or the same way that Debbie Klump just calls up, this pastor just calls up too.
Right. It doesn't appear that No, it doesn't appear that she had any history with Jody at all. It doesn't appear
Okay.
she had any history with the Averys whatsoever, other than they heard about this on the news, they prayed about it, and the Lord led them there.
That was nice of the Lord to do that.
Kind of like Pam of God.
I'm not sure which side he's working for, though.
Yeah, I'm a little I'm a little confused. I think there might be a couple different gods at this point, just like a couple different ravs, a couple different deer. I don't know. A couple
Maz, you got a
different
comment for
burned
us?
bodies.
Yeah.
And don't
A
forget
couple
the cell next to him as well.
What was that?
We've got Jesus in the cell next to him as well, don't forget.
Yes, Jesus is in the cell with him. It's kind of, he's on the phone. He's talking about Jesus in one phone call. And Laura Riccardi, I believe it's Laura Riccardi, asks if that's his cellmate. And it's just cute how it goes down. He's talking about Jesus. And Laura's like, oh, is that your roommate or cellmate? And Stephen's like, no, Jesus. It's cute.
He
No.
said, I wonder what Jesus is in for.
I just wanted to say, kind of going back to the Stephen turning Jody, and I think that's really like kind of impossible, maybe, because if you listen to his phone calls, the one thing he wants to do is keep Jody in his life, keep her there, and he's really paranoid about her leaving and not being there. And he's, so I don't think that is a possibility myself.
I don't think it's a possibility either. The other one possibility I did think of is law enforcement is just flat out full of shit. And they went in and grabbed her out of that situation for whatever reason, whether it was to save her, to flip her, whatever. They could have used Jody's drinking. Let's go. Jody's in trouble. We need to go get her out of, something could have,
Right.
it could have come completely from the phone calls, because there is at least 48 hours in between the very first time it's mentioned in a phone call that Jody is drinking and then picking her up. So it's not like it's not like it was in a phone call at noon and they scooped her up at 5. There is a couple of days in between the first time it's mentioned and then picking her up.
She mentions that. She says, no, I want to go I feel like drinking. I feel like killing myself, she said at one point.
Exactly. So that's why I wonder if they did it to save her. I mean.
And Papa Avery mentions that she's going to the fridge grabbing his beers. She's not supposed to be staying at a house that has alcohol in it.
The alcohol's in the garage. It's not in the house. It's not in the house.
It's still a gray area.
But it's not in the house, and the properties are technically and legally separate.
I just find it that the times that she mentions drinking and the trouble she's having staying around, and she just wants to kill herself or go drink herself to oblivion and be alone. That's very telling between that time and then when she goes in. It's pretty. And we all know that the law enforcement used Stephen's calls against anything he said they were using against. So I kind of believe that law enforcement snatched her up. That's my belief.
I can jump on board with that one. I can jump on board with them listening to those phone calls and deciding to just pluck her out of a bad situation. Like I said, for whatever reason, to save her, to help her, to try to flip her, for whatever reason.
We see a clear, defined all the way through this. You noticed it early on with the sweating, with the sex phone calls. Where they're using these phone calls to create a narrative, to nail things down, to, cause mayhem. Yeah.
I mean, even.
I'm listening, but I wanted to say, kind of in Jody's defense, that, anyone that's ever learned anything about alcoholism, the last thing that person really needed was to be around anyone that is drinking, let alone having alcohol on the property at all, period.
I agree 100%.
Big challenge, and it's very defeating,
Especially with the turmoil and the chaos that was surrounding her, and the man that she loves is in prison or in jail, about to go to prison for, just.
Yep. Yeah.
I probably would have started drinking.
Yeah, but it wasn't just that though, was it? Because didn't Jodie go out in the truck with Pa Avery, and they ended up at a bar, didn't they? And he ended up buying her a beer, which
Yeah,
Steve.
something.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, he stopped
Somebody's house
somewhere
too,
with
as they mentioned
alcohol.
this.
I could have
Yeah.
swore it was a house. I didn't think it was a bar. I
Yeah.
thought it was somebody's house. But yes,
Sounds a little like sabotage there.
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
when, yeah, and that Alan makes the comment, something about I didn't have to pour it down her throat or didn't have to. He didn't have to force her to drink that drink.
Yeah, we know Alan likes to drink, right? Alan was so drunk on the 5th, I think, that they don't go into Crivets on the until the 6th because he's screaming at him to stay off the property, right? Alan likes to drink, and people who like to drink like drinking buddies. So it's not surprising to me that he didn't pour it down her throat, but took somebody who was very incorrigible, right?
Right.
Phoebe.
Yeah, and even Mom Avery is drinking and used to evidently drink and had quit for 3 years. There's a lot more drinking going on that I was aware of. I found out in these phone calls.
Yeah. Linda.
I was just gonna say the pressure for Jodie, with Steven and the family. Of course, she's an alcoholic. She's gonna want to find her escape, and them making it easy for her to do that. It's. I mean, like with him drinking or having beer around, she's going to be very tempted, and she's just trying to escape because she's getting it from all ends. She doesn't know what to do. Stephen is controlling, and he's blaming everybody. Well, you shouldn't have that beer. You shouldn't do this. Well, you shouldn't do that to her. She's an adult, and Stephen's just really trying to control. You can see that he's just hovering over Jodie and blaming everybody for everything. I mean, it's surprising any of them talked to him after a while, the way he was talking to them people, like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. You should go out. You should do this. You should. Well, geez, I mean, how many things do you need somebody to do? Like, you want her to have her job, but she can't because she has to visit you. You want her to help, but yet, she can't be around Chuck. And it's just a lot of pressure on Jodie. I mean, I'm not like trying to stick up for her either, but you got to think of an alcoholic under all that pressure, not having anywhere to go, not really knowing what to do. Yeah, I can see her drink.
She can't drive. She can't get off the property without somebody's help. The middle of nowhere. Yeah. Kate.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that as well that she had all of that with his parents where she couldn't stand being around them basically, and then him saying to her that she's not allowed by Chuck, and the lawyers didn't want her speaking to Barb, so she really had no one then if she wasn't allowed to even have them to speak about the stuff going on in the house and stuff like that. They could have been an outlet for her.
Absolutely.
I think that's very insightful. Yep. Yeah. My personal theory is, since we're on Theory Thursday, is that law enforcement picked up Jodie just because they like stirring the pot. That's the whole reason Stephen ended up finding out from law enforcement that Chuck was there with Jodie in the first place. I don't see them acting altruistically. I see them, and for anybody, I see them looking to cause chaos in Stephen's life. And the more chaos there is, the more anger there is on the phone, the more likely it is that somebody's going to blurt something out. The more pissed off anybody is. Does anybody have any comments about anything sort of evidentiary that might have been said in anger?
Well, he during one of his little rants, he's hollering about people that are in the I Hate Stephen Club, and he names off people.
Well, don't leave us in suspense.
Well, he talks about how Candy hates him. There's other numerous people. I'm not going to give it all away because I want people to listen to these calls.
Oh, we
But
got to
there's
tease them a little
numerous
bit.
people in this I Hate Stephen Club that he names. And that also has, that leaves you to at least a list of people that I have always either hated him or always butting heads with him.
Right. Christy.
There is a phone call. I'm not 100% sure which one. But he does talk to Chuck in it. I'm not sure if it's the one with Chuck and Barbara or the one with Chuck and Alan. But there's insinuation that the story that we hear about the night Jody called the cops and says that Stephen choked her, there's some insinuation that a little more went on that night. I'm not sure what to think of it. I don't want to read too much into it, but Chuck kind of accuses Stephen of actually putting his hands on Jody, not Jody was full of shit because she was drunk type.
Yeah. That's well, we've talked about it many times, Christy. Stephen is he's not going to win the Husband of the Year award, anytime soon. He might not be a very nice person.
Doesn't matter.
I personally, I don't believe he killed Teresa Hallbach.
I don't care how much of an ass he is. I don't care how demanding he is, how controlling he is, I don't care. He's not capable of murdering somebody. He's not.
In Jody's interview with the police, but right before she gets out, I can't remember the date of that interview. I apologize. She does say that there were some incidents while she was drinking, but as soon as she stopped drinking, the incident stopped. It's quite possible. That sometimes if people get drunk, all of a sudden they think they become Muhammad Ali, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure there's a lot of mutual stuff that goes on. You should never lay your hands on a woman, but I agree with that. But
she also,
point is after it stopped after she stopped drinking, which is telling to me.
Right.
Well, he also says that there because it's Steve talking to Chuck about it when Chuck brings it up. And Steve also says that's what she said because that's the way she is when she's drunk. She says things like that. But there was no evidence. That's why I didn't get arrested for it.
Right. Mass.
In the same incidents, wasn't Chuck blaming Stephen of giving Jody a black eye?
Yeah, same podcast, same conversation.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Yep, that's what I was referring to.
And he makes the snide doorknob. Oh yeah, she hit her eye on a doorknob commenters.
Yeah, there was something about that. The other thing that came out is Chuck kind of insinuated that he may have had sex with Jody at some point. I don't know if he was saying it to get a rise out of Stephen or if it was an embedded confession. I don't know what it is, but Chuck definitely, Stephen makes some kind of comment and Chuck's response is, "How do you know I haven't already?" or something to that effect. So
right,
I'm not
that's
sure
a
how to
few
take
sentences.
it.
That's a few sentences after Steve informs Chuck that him and Jody are getting married and she's moving down by Oshkosh. And then Chuck says, "Well, you can have her now."
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? Isn't he dating her? Doesn't he have her? Hasn't he had her always? And then a couple sentences later in it, then Chuck says, "What if I got Jody already?"
Yeah.
That's where the says something weird about I get with her and you fire off a shotgun down by us. Whatever the hell that means.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's where the pastor steps in and says about, do you love her? Do you want to get married? And like I say, it leaves us on a cliffhanger because the pastor steps in and says, right, Jody's going to come and live with us. There's no smoking in the house. She's not allowed any alcohol, but, just to go away from that situation, she needs to be away from the hassle, from the stress, from the temptations. So she's going to come and live with us. I spoke to the lawyers. Jody sorted all the paperwork out. So you're going to get married. And, that's how it leaves us in the end.
That is quite a cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah.
So anything else that anybody found of evidentiary value? Clearly, the Averys are very cognizant that the law enforcement's taping, so they don't try and say they go out of their way not to say anything that's potentially incriminating or that anybody might learn anything from. But I do recall a point where Stephen is talking to Barb, where he says, it's May, right? But finally, he's getting around to thinking about the case. and who he might have done, and he's developing some theories. Do we learn anything about what those theories are? Or are those also cliffhangers? Linda.
Yeah, we learned that they were talking about the fire and how it wasn't that large, and who I think Stephen even talks to Bobby. Was it Bobby he talked to, and said, yeah, he's seen her leave, and was a fire. There was a big discussion on the fire. They couldn't get it down. And that was always like, that's kind of puzzling to me that they don't remember if they had a fire, and then all of a sudden now then he remembers, but it wasn't that big. So they're tossing things around. And when Stephen talks to Laura, the filmmaker, and says, he starts listing off what things, and talking about Jody and this and that, and Laura tries to give him a different perspective of that, like, maybe Stephen, maybe this is in your mind, it's really not happening. And because he's in prison and he can't, or in jail, and he can't do anything about it. So I found them phone calls a little interesting. The Barb and Stephen ones, are kind of interesting when he's talking to the family. The one with where he's talking to Laura, the filmmaker, that's really interesting how she is trying to listen to him and hear everything that's going on, because it is a shit show. I mean, people are just against each other, and she says, well, it's all about Stephen says it's all about Chuck, and it's not, if he would just leave her alone, then we would be okay. And Laura is quick to point out to him that, Stephen, maybe you're just making more of this, it's really not going on. And I just thought it was kind of touching how she was trying to get him to think less of, what he thinks might be going on, and try to concentrate more on himself, because he doesn't really concentrate on himself that much during this time. So I just thought that was kind of, insightful, that she would try to give him a different perspective.
She definitely tried to play therapist for him in a couple phone calls.
So just to be clear, we're talking about Laura Riccardi, one of the two people who did Man, the actual television, Netflix Laura Riccardi.
Right. You hear him talk to her a couple times. One of the other things Stephen does in these last phone calls is he begins pointing fingers, and it sounds like he's pointing fingers at his own brothers. It sounds like he's thinking that Earl could be involved or Chuck could be involved. He's definitely looking at more people than law enforcement at the moment.
It's about time he started thinking about who might have actually have done it, instead of worried about Chuck and Jody, don't you think?
Yeah, he's about 6 months too late. He should have been worrying about this stuff 6 months ago, in my opinion. And not
the fact that he
Jody.
doesn't is telling. The fact that he doesn't is telling. I mean, well, I think until up until Brendan gets arrested, it seems to me that the tide is kind of going his way. I know you're in parallel reading Ken Kratt's book, and trying with a vomit bag right nearby. But Ken Kratz cites in his book as the linchpin to the case. Does anybody know what Ken Kratz says? This is the most important piece of evidence in the whole case.
The blue lanyard, right?
No, that's not. Well, he did say something like that, but he says, well, maybe he cites, being he's such an excellent writer, perhaps he has multiple things that he cites as the most important piece of evidence. So good with grammar, but it's item FL, right?
Oh.
At which they don't discover until Brendan confesses, and I agree that is a very damning piece of evidence that can be put in front of a jury. They don't find that until after Brendan confesses, and that's you can kind of feel the weight starting to press in my opinion, after that happens. Up until that, I don't think the hood latch swab was discovered either until after Brendan's confession.
Right, until Brendan told them that he touched the hood latch.
Yeah, till he went under the hood.
Mhm.
So you got two pieces of evidence that magically appear that really strengthens the state's case, and you can kind of feel the weight of it on Stephen, and he's panicking. He's sort of taking it out on the only people he can, which is his family. So
And when you just said something about me paralleling with Kratz's book, the level of narcissism that man had, if they were really listening to the phone calls, Stephen was borderline cocky about not having to worry about this case because, he knows the evidence against him is bullshit because he knows he didn't do this. And in his phone calls, he's a little cocky about that. So I can see them wanting to like take him down a peg or two. Do you know what I mean? I can, if they're listening to his phone calls, I'm sure his crap talking about them and just fueled their fire. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I do. Yep.
I was just going to say, maybe with all this, like focusing on Chuck and Jody and all this drama, maybe that in itself is his way of distracting himself from everything that's going on with the prison.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Chris. You can continue.
I don't remember what I was saying, and she said something that just.
You were talking about Kratz's book.
Yeah,
taking him down.
Right. I just think his constant ridiculing them in his phone calls, the constant berating law enforcement, talking about how stupid they were. And if Ken Kratz was listening to those phone calls and heard the things Stephen was saying about him, that would have just further fueled him to nail Stephen even harder.
Yeah.
But Kate just said something about this taking the focus. I don't think Stephen was worried about the case at all in any way, shape, or form in the beginning. And I think his obsession with Jody, I think he was like that even when he was free. I think his focus on Jody was a normal thing that he did every day, even when he wasn't. I mean, look how much look at the phone calls from before he was arrested. He used to talk, he focused all his energy on Jody even before he was sitting in a jail cell. I don't think he did it just to take his mind off of it. I think it was just his natural possessiveness and worry that she was going to leave him for somebody else all the time.
So what was the incident that finally that finally Alan Avery blows up and says, "Get the F out"? What prompted that?
I don't even know. Can somebody else remember?
It was basically, I think, just the laziness of her and that she wasn't helping Mama Avery, and that Mama Avery was so complaining about it that I think he wasn't going to come home and listen to this shit,
Wasn't it about the time when Dolores did fall down?
No,
Yeah.
no. I think she.
Well, all the calls are in May, so about
Which
the
came
time,
first,
it's
the
gotta be
chicken
yes,
or
right?
the egg? Did she fall down after she threw Jody out or right before? But it was really, really close in timing. I kind of thought it was after she had already thrown Jody out that she fell down.
I think the first time she says it, but I think she actually fell down before it. But that all happens the same day. All that stuff takes place on the same day. It's all, whatever the last day is, all that stuff all happens in a 24-hour period. It might be the previous night and the next morning, but all that stuff happens in like a 24-hour period.
To me,
I
that's
can't
really
wait.
when Stephen goes off the deep end. I'm never calling you again. What do you guys think about that? I mean, that's obviously the most empty threat you've ever heard in your life, right?
Obviously.
How does it make you guys feel? When he says that just his last desperate attempt to manipulate them, or
Yeah,
he's obviously pissed. But
he even says she's the most important thing in my life, and you guys can't get along. You're fighting. You're going to drive her away. You got to realize how without Jody, I have nothing. He keeps saying that.
Kim, do you have a comment for us?
Well, I just think that Stephen feels like that his family, his mother and his dad, have betrayed him in one way or another. That, all he really cares about is talking to Jody, having some conversation with someone, anyone. You talk to a wall doesn't talk back. But if you could talk to a real live person, which, I guess he did get a roommate at one point, but it's lonely in prison. And I think that he needed that communication with someone, anyone, and it didn't matter who. But I honestly feel like that he felt that, his own mother, his own father had betrayed him.
Yeah, he does at one point say, when he's talking about the phone calls and the money in the phone calls, he does say, "That's my sanity," right?
Yeah, that's the only
Yes.
thing keeping me sane.
So yeah, I think you're exactly right, Kim. That he when you're sitting alone and all you have time to do is think for about 20 hours a day. Your mind goes places, especially when the thought of what you might be facing is really ugly. So it must
Well,
be very
and
difficult on him.
the Penny Bernstein with his wife Lori,
That's right. Yeah. He lost his
Yeah.
wife Lori. It's interesting that he lost his wife Lori to Barb's ex-husband Peter Dassey, right?
to his
That's the guy's name?
brother-in-law, and now he's afraid it's going to happen again, and this time it's going to be his brother.
Yeah. So that kind of thing happens. Did you have another comment for us, Kim?
No, all I was going to say is that, if you're sitting in a situation that he was in, your mind tends to play tricks on you, and you have no control actually on what's going on the outside. They could tell you anything that they want to tell you, but what your mind is telling you, it can work on your psyche a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
I was just gonna say, Steven's trying to hang on to Jody so hard that he just starts going against his family too. He starts, picking out. He's becoming enemies with everybody because, well, you're not gonna let Jody. Everybody's against me. You're not giving her the titles. You're not giving her my stuff. I told you, and they're trying to, without saying it, I feel they're trying to say, okay, Steven, but we're trying to protect you with this stuff. And Steven doesn't want to hear it. He's like, I don't, give Joe, she can have all my stuff. Take all my stuff. You guys are against me. I'm done. I'm suing you. I'm done talking to you. This is the last phone call. I just want Jody, so in his attempt to keep Jody, he's pissing off the family, and the family is just trying to protect him, but he doesn't see it.
Forsaking all
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, it's hard to say who's right in my mind. I see, I don't approve of the way that Steven is going about what he's doing, but I certainly understand where he's coming from, especially with regard to, needing that human interaction that Kim was talking about, and wanting to continue to talk. And if I'm going to sell all my stuff to talk, the trial's on the horizon. If I hit the trial, I can do my talking, and if I get innocent, then at least there's a path. There's a little glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel possible. This debacle he causes is nasty. Christy.
One of the other things I want to mention, and you also hear Dolores is a little upset and hurt that if you go look at the summaries, and even if you just go look at who I wrote Steven's talking to, once from November 9th to March 5th, Steven talks to Dolores all the time, every day, multiple times. Once March 6th comes and Jody is free from jail, he talks to Dolores for 3 seconds. Dolores accepts the phone call. They talk for, a little more than 3 seconds, maybe a minute, and the phone gets passed off to Jody for the next 40. And Dolores even brings that up. You don't talk to me anymore. You don't talk to me. I do all this running around. I do this for you. I do that for you. Go do this, go do that, pay this phone bill, do this, do that, bring Jody here, you don't talk to me anymore. All you do is argue with her. He stops talking to his mother once Jody gets out of jail, really.
Once
Hey,
Jody's at the mother's house.
Mhm.
It's like, then all the focus is Jody, where the mother used to be the go-between and had to say big boobies and
Mhm.
stuff back and forth between them on the calls. And the mother is feeling ejected by that. Yeah.
Used and discarded would be the words I
Yes.
would use.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't Stephen make the comment on one of the calls that Mom won't even look at me when she comes to visit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, she doesn't even look at me. Yep. I wouldn't either.
So,
I'd be just as pissed as her. I would, and never once does this man say thank you to anybody, and that drives me nuts. Never once.
Yeah.
Maz?
Like I say, poor Ma Avery, bless her. She's doing her best. And, she takes Jodie to the prison to go and visit him, or go to jail or prison, wherever he is at the moment. She takes him there for a visit, 20-minute visit. She just feels like a spare end, because all she's done is just be a taxi service. She sits there and listens while Stephen and Jodie bicker backwards and forwards, and Stephen hardly talks to her while she's there. So she just feels used and abused, basically, Bethla.
I think he's in the nick. Isn't that what you guys over there? He's in the nick?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
Do you think that don't you think that the demise of Jody leaving and the family just go, because Steven's really against everybody at this point. He thinks there's nobody there for him, and that's when I think that the law enforcement started to really use the family against each other. They wanted this. They want, and they're happy to see this. You know what I'm saying? So when Steven is like totally, he feels like he's all by himself. Nobody's listening to him, but they're all there for him, but he's just so fixated on Jody and not his case that, it's kind of working in the way of, law enforcement getting what they want. I mean, just here we are, they're all against him now. Maybe we can start in, they find his weak points. And I think these phone calls, I mean, I don't agree with how Stephen acts at all. He is very selfish, and he's not going to hear it. But I also can understand pressures that he's under, and he doesn't have anything, and he really doesn't know what's going on in the case. He doesn't really think anything's going to happen of it, because he knows, like Christy said, he didn't do it, and it doesn't make sense to him. And as he's going over what don't make sense to him, the only thing he can think about is getting out and being with Jody and moving away. And I don't want any of that stuff. None of that stuff means nothing to me. And I just want Jody, and I think law enforcement kind of used that against the, Steve.
They definitely
I
did.
think you're 100% right.
And unfortunately for Stephen, he spent 18 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That's most of his adult life. And he learned a way of survival, not a way of manners and pleasant speaking. He learned a way of, you have to show you're the top dog so that nobody messes with you, or you have to at least show that you know what, he had to survive. He had to
Prison
survive
manners.
18 years in prison. He's got prison manners.
manners.
He doesn't have the manners that we have. He doesn't have those social skills. He doesn't. He's got some values as far as like the not lying and the trying to be honest, because even when you catch him, he tries to be honest. He really, I feel he does. Um he, he's got a prison way of thinking, and that's working against him in this a lot.
You got to think that he's maintaining, he went in as a young guy, and when you go into prison like that and you're institutionalized, especially for something you didn't do, but you don't grow while you're in prison. I mean, your mentality kind of stays the same, because you're not dealing with social, with anybody's social. You're in a confinement. And I think Stephen, when he got out, was still maintaining a young man's thoughts, and so it was hard for him to, grow up so fast. It's hard for him to. He's still a young kid still. I mean, even
He
some of the
is.
members of the family said he came out still thinking it's cool to race your car down the street or, go sit around and bull crap with your friends and, just do different things that you do when you're younger and not older and trying to, be living a good life, I mean, it just kind of boggles my mind that they don't, Stephen doesn't really know anything outside of a 20-year-old's life at that point.
Right. And not a very law-abiding 20-year-old either. I think another thing that strikes me is that I think he kind of, he tries to think of things that he might have done different in the Penny Bernstein case to make different outcomes happen. He's aware of the outcomes that weren't good, and he's actually that's one of the reasons why he wants to call the media all the time to get his side out. And the Lori thing that was just brought up, his first wife, he might be wondering to himself, is there something I could have done different? Should I have been more active, actively involved? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? And he's trying whatever he can do to get the opposite outcome that happened in that situation. Kim.
He didn't say that. He says, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. But he says that nobody listened to him. So he wanted to get his story out. So that's why he kept talking, to, news media, anybody that will listen to him, because he didn't speak up last time. So he really wanted to make sure people heard him, no matter at any cost. When the lawyers told him to be quiet, he did an interview, so he just wouldn't shut up this time. And before, he didn't speak at all.
Yeah. Kim, do you have a comment?
Well, Stephen went into prison when he was 22 years old. And at that age, at that point in his life, that's when his life stopped. And he spent those 18 years in prison. When he was released from prison, it just makes sense that his life never went forward those 18 years. And in other words, as a human being, he never caught up to those 18 years. And when he was released and out for 2 years, he never got to catch up with, being 40 years old versus 22, and went right back in as an 18-year-old kid. So therefore, he's not had the opportunity to grow as an adult, to experience the things that he has children, yes, but experience, like the hardships that lots of us go through, paying bills, going to doctors, this, that, and the other, because he's always had it, his bills are always paid. His doctor is always paid. He doesn't understand what it is to be on the outside for any length of time. 2 years is not anything compared. And his life basically stopped at 18. That's the way I look at it.
And when he just started life again, 2 years, like you said, isn't a lot. But then they get him again. So, he's still lost. He's very lost.
I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for him.
But you can also see that when he did get out, him walking down the street, going to the courthouse, the smile on his face, how proud he was of himself to have accomplished in such a short period of time what he thought life was about, only to have that taken away again, which is very sad.
Indeed it is. Does anyone else have anything that they want to talk about? There are a lot of calls. How about the state of Rolly's trailer? Why didn't Jody just go live in Rolly's trailer? Mass.
Yeah, she did go and live in Rolly's trailer after Ma and Pa kicked her out. But the thing is, it had no running water, it had no sinks. So, like they said, how's she managing down there? How's she going for a wee and, for number twos? And Stephen says, well, she's not eating. So she's not crapping because she's not eating. And Jodie felt like because she wasn't contributing, then she didn't want to eat the food. But it was all right for Chucky on the side to buy her the odd burger now and again. But yeah, that's why she didn't go and stay in Rollies permanently, because, you know, she couldn't. It wasn't livable. The state they'd left it in, they'd literally demolished the place.
Doesn't Stephen tell Alan Avery she can shit in a pail?
Yes.
He does. He says that she can go in the bucket. She can go in the bucket. But
Yeah, that call was striking to me is that Alan Avery actually sounded fatherly in that call a little bit.
He did.
And I'm like, that's the first time, you know, that he hasn't dropped some kind of bomb on us, you know, calling somebody a, you know, so this or that, or, you know. So he actually, I think he thought a little bit about what he was going to say in that call, and I was shocked. Is this really Alan saying all this stuff?
Yeah, Alan was a little level-headed in that call. The other thing I want to mention is Alan was also calling Rolly and trying to tell Rolly to change the locks on the trailer so Jody couldn't go down there. I really don't, again, we weren't there. We don't know. But for whatever reason, they didn't want her in the trailer either. Could it be because she was down there drinking? They thought she was selling Stevens. I don't know what they were thinking, but Alan definitely didn't want her staying down in that trailer.
Well, and she's also there to lure Chuck, and if they get her off Steve, they don't want her on Chuck either, I believe, because they view her as not a good person.
I don't blame them.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate all the thank yous to all my team members and all of our guests and all the people that come into Discord. I welcome you into the chats on YouTube when I'm there watching the chat. I don't care who you are. If you're decent and respectable, and I will not kick you out. Want to hear what you have to say, and we'll do our very best to answer any questions that we can on the spot. But I still would want to encourage them to come and check us out, because we do have openness. You know, we want to work together to get to the bottom of this. I think together we are achieving more.
This has been a Foul Play production.